What's new in filmmaking technology this week? News, reviews, education, insights, opinions, and ideas from the CineD Newsroom with Nino Leitner and Johnnie Bahiri. This is Focus Check, the weekly Cinetech podcast.
Hi guys, welcome to Focus Check. This is our CineD podcast, and today I'm here with my friend and colleague Florian. Florian, how are you?
Hi Johnnie, nice to be here.
Thank you very much. When Florian says nice to be here, the office is just next door, and this is our studio. Actually, we do the reviews on the other side, and this is our podcast setup. But we are here to talk about our CineD databases. And the reason that we chose to talk about is we get so many requests from people to know a bit more. And also, please correct me if I'm wrong, this is the most visited part of our site. People love the reviews, they love the news, they're coming back to read what's new. But when we can measure in general where people spend most of the time, obviously it's the databases because they're very curious about the lab tests and to know what their cameras are capable of and so on. But Florian, one of the reasons that we are talking, besides of you being a colleague and a friend, is because you were the original initiator of our databases.
The databases are the reason why I'm here, more or less.
That's kind of almost how we met. But before we even continue to talk about the databases, please introduce yourself so people know that you are actually also a professional.
My name is Florian. I have been working for CineD for a couple of years now. Before that, I worked at a camera rental. I used to be a camera and lens technician for, I think it was 8 or 9 years. And while I did that, I was also actively working as a camera assistant for commercials, short films, and documentaries. So I had the experience from being in the field as a professional working, and also was able to give this knowledge to the clients at the camera rental when they had questions about cameras, lenses, and everything that comes with being a camera assistant.
And then one day, when you saw that there are so many people who are actually asking about cameras and lenses and different stuff like this, you went back home.
People kept asking the same questions all over again. So at one point, I grew tired of just saying the same thing over and over again, or actually having to look up the same thing over and over again. So I decided to simply just note down everything. It started with like printouts, like A4 sheets of simple tables printed out. It all started with the 5D, like the 5D Mark II. That was pretty easy. It was able to record HD, like full HD and small HD, in I think 2 different bit rates.
You
that
said
was
Small HD?
Small HD.
Okay, that's how that's how Canon.
Very good question. I'm very sure they did not refer to this. Might be a copyright issue, but no, they had like 1080p and 720p in 2 different bit rates, and that was it. But people kept asking, okay, this camera, it can record this, and how long can I record onto a, back then, 16 gigabyte flash card, like memory card? People kept asking, how long can I record onto a 16 gigabyte card? And we kept going to the camera, turning the camera on, looking at, okay, that's how long you can record. After a while, we started noting this down in those spreadsheets. And after a while, I simply got tired of always having to look this up. This was a printout. We had like a binder, which we always would get when we get a question like this, and we would have to look it up, just look what it can do, and then tell the customer. And one time I simply grew tired of this. I simply created a digital version of this printout with all data on it, and that was the beginning of the camera database.
Great. So how did you keep it actually updated? Because the rental house, obviously, in those old good days, the rental house kept getting stuff, cameras and lenses and so on.
Exactly.
So
instead of creating new printouts and new spreadsheets, I simply kept adding the same data sets to the spreadsheet, and it grew and it grew and it grew with all the new cameras as well. So we did thorough testing every time we would get a new camera, which we basically do still at CineD.
We will come to the subject of CineD in a second, but tell me, how did you make the decision what parameters actually to include? What is so important for cameras or lens and so on? Is it based on customers' questions or it was your idea?
Mostly customer questions. And if I saw that there was additional benefits, I would try to think, okay, in the future, what would people ask for that they are not asking now? So I tried to make it as future-proof as possible. So I included most of the data that I was able to find, which was not easy back then because there was not very thorough documentation of cameras or then even lenses. So there was a lot of back and forth with manufacturers as well, trying to get the information that I was able to get and trying to figure out, okay, what is actually interesting to customers and to professionals.
I think this is still very challenging today. Try to get the base ISO of a camera. Sometimes it's like, why it's not clearly there, for example, yeah? Sure. Or sometimes even in recording time. I think there is, of course, we have some information from the manufacturers, like camera manufacturers, but I think what you try to do and later us together to have a camera database. And that was the idea. If you're looking for an answer about different stuff that we will talk in a second, you simply come to the camera databases and you have it all there. Let's move forward. And of course, you started to work with us and then we saw these very nice databases that you have. And the thing is, we were a bit concerned about the exposure of the database back then, meaning you put a lot of hours and there was already a considerable amount of data. And by the way, how does it feel? Of course, you wanted everybody to know about this, but it's not so easy, huh?
It all started basically with a website that I did on my own in my free time. So that was my personal website back then. Even while I was working at the rental house, this was all on my private website. And we did link from the company website to my website, which already is a bit of a hassle. But then that was easier for me to show off to manufacturers, to other people who are interested in this. But I always felt like there is more to this than just the small bubble that I showed this tool to. I wasn't very good at SEO or marketing myself, still am not. But I always had the feeling that there must be more people who this is useful for. So I tried to approach you a couple times, or especially Nino. It's not easy to get a hold of you guys.
There is a reason. There is a reason.
There is a reason. But eventually I got through to you guys and we actually met one time because initially I just felt like, okay, maybe we can do something together to give this tool a bit more exposure. And actually that was the time when COVID hit. I was unemployed and you guys felt like, okay, this might be a good point to actually make something, to take this and grow it into something bigger. And that was just perfect timing because I was ready to make the next bigger step with exposure. And you guys were apparently also looking for something to
add as our Swiss Army knife.
Exactly.
Site for filmmakers. Just to elaborate on one point when you said it's not so easy to get hold of us, I just want to say that the amount of emails that we are receiving every day is sometimes overwhelming. And at the end of the day, there is a time management and capacity of how much you can read, answer, follow with emails when you know that you have to still cater the site, do reviews, talk to the people in the company and maybe say hi to the family. So, of course, if you ever try to reach us and from whatever reason we did not respond in time, it's not really nothing personal here. Please understand, it can be that we were just a bit late to answer, but we do our best. Okay, fast forward. we decided to collaborate together, and we were very happy that the databases found a good home. So let's dive a little bit more into this. The databases, that's a nice title, but it consists of what?
The CineD Databases.
The CineD, of course.
The CineD Databases, as they are now, they consist of basically two main data sets, like the camera side and the lens side. So there is of course, you can go into the CineD databases now and see there's the camera database and the lens database. Both are like very large sets of data, and we try to make them as easy as possible to skim through to find what you're looking for. And there's also the third tool, which was also the last tool that I created before it became the CineD Databases, which is the lens coverage tool. And the lens coverage tool combines both data sets in a way that makes sense, is accurate and very informative to professionals, but also easy to use, which is usually a very, very difficult task, because something that is useful to professionals is most of the times not easy to use, which we know very well from using cameras. It's very hard to make something very accessible to a lot of people, but still have a very professional feel to it. So the lens coverage tool is the one that brings everything together. And if you're not interested in the holy grail of combining everything, you can still look at simply the camera side of things or only the lens side of things.
Good. What is a lens coverage tool? Of course, you and I are living this every day, but for somebody from the outside, and when you say that it's a combination of two elements, the camera and the lens, what does it mean? I can help a little bit and maybe guide you through in the sense of every camera has a sensor. Then what?
True. It starts with a sensor. Every camera has different recording modes, usually. So if you can record the full sensor, that's great. You put a lens on it, that's great. It usually works. But especially modern cameras have even more variants to record. So if you're not using the whole sensor, for example, many cameras have a full frame sensor, but then they include a Super 35 recording mode, for example.
Or even a 16:9 still doesn't record the entire sensor.
Correct. And then by reducing the recording area of that sensor, you suddenly open this camera up for a lot of different lenses. For example, when you have a full frame sensor but change the camera into Super 35 mode, all of a sudden you can use hundreds of thousands of vintage lenses who were initially produced for Super 35 film cameras, for example. So that brings us to the topic of lens coverage. So you can use lenses that were not made for full frame cameras, but use them on a full frame body by reducing the recording format of this camera.
Or use most of it and risk yourself with some vignetting. And that's exactly what you can see with the lens coverage tool. You can see the edges. You can simply see if the image circle of your lens will fit a certain mode, sensor mode, theoretically.
The thing is with lens coverage, like the image circle, is something that almost every company treats differently. So a company that creates vintage lenses might say, okay, this lens has an image circle of this and this much, but since it's a vintage lens, the vintage character might also be vignetting, for example, or darkening in the corner that might add to the style of the vintage style of lens. So this might mean, okay, the company says the image circle is larger, but if you compare it to a different lens, a modern lens, that is not supposed to have vignetting, then of course the image circle would potentially be smaller. So image circle or lens coverage is something that every manufacturer treats differently. That's why it's so hard to give an exact number or show people exactly that this lens covers this sensor. So what we do is we give what the manufacturer says and display it on top of the recording format. So we do not ensure that this lens actually covers the sensor area completely. So there might still be vignetting. We also give a disclaimer at the bottom of the lens coverage tool. Image circle is something very subjective, and many companies treat the image circle differently, like what they state, what their lenses cover. A very good resource, if you're interested in learning more about image circle, would be the Cine Lens Manual. It's a very thorough and detailed technical book that came out, I think, last year. It's like the holy grail, the Bible for lens nerds. So there are a few chapters that go very in-depth into what is lens coverage and what is the image circle. But summed up, it is something that is not definitely definable. It's like a bit of a unicorn, but we try to make it as easy as possible in the lens coverage tool for you to actually see. Theoretically, this lens covers this recording format, or it will have vignetting with a very high chance, if not even portholing, which is complete darkening of the corners. And this we are very well able to display in the lens coverage tool.
Lately, I'm noticing some trend with lens manufacturers to have a Super 35 APS-C lens, but declare that there's a large image sensor, a large circle, that can cover even full frame or even more sometimes. What is preventing those manufacturers to actually declare that specific lens from being a full frame? Why do they say APS-C we can actually accommodate larger sensors?
So I think what the problem for manufacturer is that, I don't know, either they cannot correctly measure their image circle, or they are simply afraid to say, we give you perfect coverage without vignetting or so. They're kind of trying to play it safe by saying, we give you this works perfectly.
This is guaranteed.
This is guaranteed. But you can go beyond if you're willing to take the trade-off of slight vignetting or sharpness fall off or so. So most lenses are actually usable beyond what the manufacturer says they can do. But you have to take it with a grain of salt, because sometimes there are quality fall-offs beyond what the manufacturer states.
Let's describe the kind of workflow, especially with cameras, because with cameras, we are insisting to have the camera in-house in order to add it to our camera databases.
Correct.
So we get a camera, let's say Lumix GH7, for example. One of the problems with modern cameras, there are at least 1 million options over there. And you are now, okay, you look at this and then what? You go like, oh my God, or...
That's usually exactly my reaction, especially with, for example, the GH7, because you mentioned it. The GH7, I think now, if you go into the recording modes, I think it has 12 pages of different recording modes. And that is only in NTSC or PAL mode, so 60 hertz or 50 hertz. So if you change between modes, you have 24 pages. And then you add 24 hertz mode as well, which again has at least 6 different modes or maybe more.
And then there's the cinema, like the 24p mode, which is the cinema mode. So it's even more.
So my job is to look through this, think to myself, okay, what have I gotten myself into? And then I have to start actually going through all the recording modes piece by piece, noting down what it can record. And
you actually put a card inside and literally press record.
That is correct. I actually have to put a card inside, note down how long it can record for in each and every single recording mode, each and every frame rate. So all those data points in the camera database, if you go into recording modes and times, you see a recording mode. Those are the actual recording modes and times that I noted down from the camera. And those are not taken from the manufacturer. Because also one problem is that most manufacturers don't even give us the tools to check exactly which camera can record in what resolution, at which frame rate, at which bit depth, and for how long. Many camera manufacturers state how long you can record in 24p, but they probably only state, okay, you can record in 4K in 24p for up to then that many minutes. But then they have different bit rates, bit depths, and they usually don't give all that information in their spec sheets. So that's where we come in and note down each and every one of them.
So you're blessing and cursing at the same time.
That is correct. That happens a lot on a daily basis for me when I test a camera.
And then still I want Florian to be happy and smile at the office, yeah?
Well, that's the joy. I mean, it all started as something that I was happy about doing in my spare time. This all started as a hobby. So when this became the CineD Databases, this became my job, which many people will think, oh my God, it sounds like a dream come true. You're doing something for fun as a hobby, and then you start making money using or doing this. So I still enjoy doing it. Sometimes I get the feeling, okay, why am I doing this? Because it's just easily so much work. But every time I get an email or a reply from a user or from somebody who just looked something up and took the time to write me to say, oh my God, I'm in pre-prep, for example, and I need to get a quick calculation. I don't know, do I need 3 terabytes or 10 terabytes of storage after I'm done shooting? And I just looked at your tool, just did a quick calculation, and my job was done. Every time I get a message like this of people actually being able to use this and it's saving them time and frustration, that makes my day.
So you spend the time in order that everybody else can save the time.
Correct.
That's nice. Very nice.
Because in the end, I'm still a filmmaker by heart. So I know how frustrating it can be, especially if you're not able to find data or if you simply cannot find information. I mean, the beauty of the internet is there is so much information out there, but to find the relevant information has gotten so much harder. So all of those tools, as soon as I can make another filmmaker's day easier, I'm happy.
We'll be back after this message from our sponsor.
Welcome to 1 Minute Tips by Fujifilm and CineD. Let's talk about some important qualities you should look for in an onboard monitor. This is going to be part 1 of 2. Let's talk about color. Perfect color reproduction is very difficult to achieve on smaller monitors, so instead of perfection, focus on consistency. This can be achieved through making sure your colors don't change based on your viewing angle and that they stay consistent across all varying levels of brightness. And what about brightness? Generally, you want something as bright as possible so that you can adjust your settings for both indoor and outdoor, but once again, be aware that there's a compromise on the extremes of brightness and how color and contrast are perceived. The ability to upload custom LUTs is another huge bonus, as you can dial in different looks for yourself and your client without having to fiddle with camera settings, keeping it recording in its native log format. Check back for part 2 where we talk about utility functions and interfaces for onboard monitors. This has been 1 Minute Tips. Until next time.
And now back to the show.
Florian, so the cameras we get in-house and we testing them inside out. How about the lenses? Because that's obviously a bit more complicated. Simply with the amount of past and current lenses, that's a bit more challenging. So how do we do this?
So with the lenses, as long as there is information from the manufacturer, which for most of the lenses there is, I simply copy the data from the manufacturer. Of course, I cross-reference with other sources if available, but especially for photo lenses, the manufacturer gives certain amount of data, and I simply have to trust in this data. Because, for example, if you look at a lens set usually consists of at least 5, 7, 10 lenses. We simply cannot take all the lenses, test everything. I did cross-reference a lot in the past, and more than 99% of the time, the data that the manufacturer provides is accurate. So from that experience, I've grown used to trusting the manufacturer on most of the things. I know certain parameters that I should cross-check, and I still do cross-check every time I add a new lens. But most of the time, the data is correct from the manufacturer. And that is what is being added to the lens database.
Okay. Again, that's the lens database. And then for the coverage tool, you obviously try to mix both.
Correct.
Camera and lenses.
One thing, going back to the lenses, because I just touched on photo lenses, it's a bit different with cine lenses. Because for cine lenses, the manufacturers are usually more accurate with what they tell you. Or, especially with older lenses, there is simply no documentation. So for older lenses, especially cine lenses, cine primes, cine zooms, especially anamorphic lenses, there is a lot of information in the database that is derived directly from the person who actually produced the lenses. One good example is, for example, the RE master zoom. There is barely any information on the RE master zoom, partially because it was not sold. It didn't sell that well. There's not too many people who have this lens, and there's not too many people who, because it's an old lens as well. And I actually went back to the source, actually trying to find the person who actually was the product manager on this lens. And only this person was able to give me information that was simply not available on the internet or in any other books or in any other data sets that the manufacturer had. So I had to scour for a lot of older lenses through companies, some people who were already retired. I had to kind of snoop out and bother them long enough so they can actually provide me with even drawings of, I don't know, from the 1960s or so, from lenses that they produced. But they simply, it was one drawing and then it was never noted down anywhere else. Because that was the time when you sold cine lenses, it was such a rare thing to include manuals or tech sheets or so. So there's a lot of information in the lens database, especially for older cine lenses, that simply are not available anywhere else.
You talk like this, and of course I hear, I in my mind, I see how a mini documentary can be made already, or a series of mini documentaries chasing those people that probably now are in their 80s, 90s even. Yeah, challenging. Good. We are not charging money for this information. So what do we ask people to kindly do? Can you please elaborate?
Of course. When I approached CineD, just a short aside, when I approached you, everything was free. Everything was free to use, and we still do that because, in my opinion, information should be available to as many people as possible. And thankfully, after my knowledge base has been converted to the CineD databases, this has continued onwards. So certain things in the databases you can still start using, but if you want to dive deeper, we said, okay, we are providing most of the stuff for everyone for free, and we want to keep giving you everything for free. So for certain things, we simply ask for users to log into their CineD account or create an account with us. So at least we know that we get more metrics this way of how many people actually want to use this more seriously. And it also helps us in the back end to keep this running for even longer. So we don't charge any money if you want to use the databases. All we ask is at a certain point in some tools, we simply ask you to log in or register to our site, which is still free, and you can keep using it for as long as you like.
Nice. What should we expect for the future? Are there any enhancements or plans that us can share with the audience?
That's a very good question. Is there anything we can share already?
Maybe you want to...
We should have talked about this before.
We should have.
We should have prepared.
We can also say, maybe a bit diplomatic, and say that we are working to enhance the tool, like always.
We're always working to adding new cameras and lenses, of course. So the databases are always up to date as possible. Of course, we keep doing lab tests and we keep adding new cameras to the camera database. Every time a new lens comes out, the data will be there, I don't know, a couple of days or weeks later. So it will always be up to date. We keep adding new things. We keep adding new tools. I'm not sure if we can talk about any new tools yet.
Well, in general, we can say that we are trying to find ways to simplify anything that has to do with anamorphic, for example. Just with it's easier because we get so many questions from people that are being a bit confused with the, let's say, sensor sizes or sensor ratio. And
sensor
then
ratio and D-squeeze
and
factor,
exactly. So people would love to know the perfect combinations. For example, if I'm using a 16:9 sensor, what lens can I use? Should it be a 1.3 squeeze or 1.5 and so on? We're not here to give the answers. I'm just saying those are the type of questions that we are being asked so many times. And that's what also driving us to hopefully solve this or just make it easy with calculations also, yeah.
And those are also things we sometimes struggle ourselves. When I created the databases, it was out of frustration of something that
you were struggling with and you needed to look for the answer.
Correct. Yeah. I was looking for a better way to do things.
I think it's easy from the self-experience and questions come the solution that you are looking for.
So simply by getting frustrated because we cannot find a solution quickly or easily, we usually try to find a solution to this. And if it makes sense to more and more people, we start building something around this. And of course, if it makes sense to us, then it would probably make sense to our audience as well, and to our users. So we will gladly create new tools. If we're also very happy to listen to feedback. If you guys write us, okay, I've been struggling with this and this and this, we will gladly look at it and say, okay, this makes sense. A lot of people might be struggling with this. So this might be the next tool that we implement in the CineD databases.
Yeah. Good. Florian, thank you very much. It's always nice talking to you. It's also nice, of course, I know the story, but still to talk about this is always...
a bit of nerd talk.
Exactly.
It was very in-depth, yeah.
And I hope you guys enjoyed, or if you ever used our databases, please write us if you had difficulties and something needs to be done a bit different. As Florian said, if you have any idea, something that might, that we maybe didn't think of or we will try to do, just share with us with the comments, and we'll be very happy to look at this. Florian, thank you very much.
Thank you very much for having me.
Guys, thank you very much. Don't forget, this is Focus Check from CineD. Like, subscribe, look for us in the different podcast platforms and so on, and we will see you next week. Thank you.